In this edition of Art Rocks, moving photographs from Angola prison at the end of a life sentence.
Sometimes I read, sometimes I draw pictures, just, to make this process a little easier.
We meet a local artist capturing a new perspective.
I wanted to show these people that this stuff exists. I mean, this stuff is here. It's beautiful scenery.
A veteran heals through visual expression.
It's incredible to see a person fly when I was in a body cast on a bed.
And an exhibition challenging the traditional meaning of fiber art.
This is such an incredible representation of over 40 years of contemporary art.
It's all ahead on this edition of Art Rocks.
Art Rocks is made possible by the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting and by viewers like you.
Hello, I'm James Fox Smith, publisher of Country Roads magazine, and this is Art Rocks. In our first segment, photographer Waselchuk captured moving end-of-life images at Louisiana's Angola State Penitentiary, where the inmate hospice volunteers have taken on a compassionate mission caring for fellow prisoners who are dying behind bars. Here's their story.
In expressive black and white images, photographer Waselchuk captures the pathos of the transition from life to death in a maximum security prison. Angola State Penitentiary has an inmate population of just over 5,000. 74% are serving life sentences and expect to grow old and die there. Not long ago, prisoners there died mostly alone and unattended in the prison hospital. But that changed in 1997.
Warden Burl Kane was reading the newspaper on a Sunday afternoon, and he read about a hospice program. And we're very fortunate here at Angola. He's a very hands-on warden, so he, knows that we have an aging population, and so he thought about bringing a hospice program to Angola.
A year later, in 1998, the prison hospice program at Angola accepted its first patient.
Every inmate in Angola has a full-time job, so that's what makes our program so special and unique, is that our guys volunteer their time over and above their job, so they are true volunteers.
It makes me reflect back on when I was a child, when the elders in our family fell sick or was dying, how the family coalesced together to take care of that person.
Gary Tyler is among 30 inmate volunteers with the nationally recognized prison hospice program at Angola. After being trained, Tyler still wasn't sure that he was ready for the challenge of working with a dying patient.
I never thought that I'd be in a position where I would have to feed, clothe, and bathe, and even wipe a man's butt. But that is the responsibility that I've taken on, because this individual needs us. He needs the volunteers. He needs somebody that can be there where he feels comfortable with, where he feels secure.
Hospice volunteers may spend 6 months to more than a year with a patient, gradually getting to know them, providing patient care like shaving and bathing needs, helping them move about, or simply spending time with them.
Sometimes I read books, sometimes I draw pictures, just, to kind of, make this process a little easier, a little more, kind of letting know somebody here with you, we've gone through this together.
One of the important advantages of the prison hospice program is relaxed visitation rules, so that patients in the treatment center can see friends and family more frequently. The program recognizes the inmate family, other prisoners who may have known the patient for decades. While being administratively supportive of hospice, the penitentiary does not finance the prison program.
The program needed money. So they relied upon a lot of outside donations from people. So we wanted to kind of be self-sufficient, in the program. And we have a monthly meeting with all of the volunteers, and quilting came up.
It started with one quilt they raffled off at the semi-annual Angola Prison Rodeo and Crafts Fair. Next, quilts handmade by the hospice volunteers were offered for sale and soon became a popular attraction at the fair.
With the money we make, we invested into the program itself. We buy the hygiene products.
They get things that they really can't normally get out the commissary, out of the canteen here, you know, like French bread, you know, like Campbell's soup, you know, sliced cheese.
Over the last decade, the quilters have seen their artistic skills and creativity grow.
But after I had the basic fundamentals of making a quilt, what I did was I focused on drawing on the quilt, stitch pictures into my quilt. For example, a man and a woman sitting together.
One of the volunteers, Diego Zapata, uses fabric paints on a quilt as if it were a canvas. The volunteers also create quilts for those dying patients in their care.
We do quilts for every patient. The most time when the patient dies, this quilt we pass to his family. So it's a good memory that somebody in the family had a quilt. They remember his own one, loves one, and they remember the program.
Perhaps the most challenging work of all for these volunteers is the intimate bond that develops with the dying patient.
You know, some patients are more smoother than others. You know, you have some patients that are stubborn. You have some patients that, you know, that has on a mask and really don't want you to know who they really are. And sometimes you have to get past those barriers before you can really actually know him. And then once you get to know him, you know, then, you know, the process, it really starts. It really begins. Then, you know, you really meet the real person, and then he starts to confide in you, open up to you, start telling, you know, things that he probably have never told no one in his life.
Grace Before Dying is the name of the award-winning traveling exhibition featuring Laurie Waselchuk's photographs, along with 2 large quilts handcrafted by inmate volunteers in the hospice program. The show is touring correctional facilities, museums, and community centers throughout Louisiana and Mississippi. Prison officials say that the hospice program has brought about a positive transformation in the prison population. Prisoners who may have regarded the hospital with distrust have grown to appreciate the respect and dignity afforded to dying prisoners.
I'm quite sure it's tragic to die alone. And by volunteers being there and ensuring them that they have someone that cares for them and willing to be there for them, that helps the patient a great deal. And I think that's one of the most important things about the program. For that patient know that he don't have to die alone.
Now, let's take a look at some of Louisiana's arts and cultural events in the coming week. For more information on these events, visit the website at lpb.org/artrocks. And for more arts activities like these, check out countryroadsmag.com. For Sacramento artist Justin Majeczky, a photo is truly worth 1,000 words. Through time-lapse photography, Majeczky invites each viewer to see the beauty that surrounds us, frame by frame.
Usually I try and give the viewer, obviously, my point of view. I mean, that's what makes art so wonderful, is that it's completely subjective. I remember seeing a photo that was on a National Geographic cover, and you might know it, it's kind of famous. It was a young woman from another country, and her eyes, her green eyes, I remember being about 12 years old, and just looking at that photo, and it made me feel something different inside. I don't know, it made me feel in a way that I've never felt by looking at a photograph, and I didn't even know that that was possible. I didn't know that you could look at an image and it would change your outlook. And from that day, that's all I wanted to do. I wanted to produce content that would change people's outlooks on their lives. I've always liked video and I've always liked photography, so time-lapse was a perfect marriage between the two. You have to pretty much do as much pre-production as you do shooting. So equal time, 50-50. Knowing where you're going, why you're going there, what time of the day you're going. Those are all huge factors in what I do. There was an evening I wanted to go shoot some starscapes, and there was supposed to be a chance of thunderstorms. And I knew the Milky Way came out at about 10 o'clock, and then I knew that the storms were supposed to roll in at about 11:30 or 12 o'clock, I think. And I knew that the combination was there for something really interesting and dynamic to happen. So we did it. We put everything in the car, drove 2 hours, 2.5 hours to Emerald Bay, and I shot a time lapse. And sure enough, Milky Way comes out, and then all of a sudden these big storm clouds come in, and just lightning and thunder all over the place. That's a good example of pre-planning, pre-cognitive thought into what you're going to go actually shoot, and having nature perform for you. I mean, it just all came together. That's definitely my favorite shot I've ever shot. When I arrive on a scene, I like to kind of look over the whole scene. I'll kind of survey and pick my composition on what I think is the strongest, and that's, obviously something that's subjective to the artist. I'll look at my rig, and I'll decide, okay, yeah, this is what I want, and then I'll go ahead and I'll start the time lapse. Every time it's different. It depends on the subject matter of what I'm shooting, of how long I'll shoot. Night scenes sometimes are up to 8 hours. Sometimes the cityscapes are 20 minutes. When I made the Sacramento film, immediately it hit me that there's this really beautiful contrast between the rural, outlying areas of the country that are just beautiful, and morning sunrise and the sunflowers and all of the agriculture, and just 10 minutes outside of the bustling city, this exists. So once it got released, my goal for the film was to get 50,000 online views in a month. And I thought that goal was really attainable because it's a city and there's people in the city. My expectations were exceeded in the second day. It started getting posted on other blog sites, F-Stoppers, CNN, it was kind of everywhere for a little while there. And, just really humbling and exciting. I like to believe I was maybe born an artist. I don't know if that's true or not, but my grandfather and great-grandfather were award-winning photographers in Baltimore, and my grandfather used to shoot for the Baltimore Zoo and all that stuff. And so I kind of grew up around photography. He had a photography studio in his basement that I would always go down and Google at when I was young, I heard a good quote once, and the difference between a professional photographer and an amateur photographer is professionals already made all the mistakes. And I take that to heart, and I think that's completely true, because I have failed a lot, and you will too, but that's part of learning. Me and my wife this summer are going to go travel around the western seaboard, and we're going to shoot a bunch of time lapses and photos while we're out there camping, and just keep putting more content out there, more inspiring content. A lot of people spend a lot of time in their homes, and they don't get really to go out and appreciate a nice sunset or sunrise or the stars or things like that. And I wanted to show these people that this stuff exists. I mean, this stuff is here. It's beautiful scenery just out your doorstep. And I want to inspire people to go outside and enjoy nature, because it's all around us.
To see more, visit variant3.com. Next, we meet a war veteran who found healing through the arts. Not only was he able to combat old demons, he was also able to express himself like never before. Here's his story.
I'm retired Marine Corps. I was wounded in Vietnam. I've been retired since 1970. I have wax here to keep my hands from crippling up because the tendons will stretch and the hand will become unusable. But I'll take this, and by the end of the day, this will become something. I see things in everything. I like to see people. I watch people. I wonder how they would look in bronze, or marble, or wood, or whatever. I am a volunteer teacher at Maitland Art Center. I'm a volunteer at Orlando Museum of Art. I do this almost every month on the first Thursday events. For Maitland, I teach and do demonstrations there on the second Friday of each month. Yeah, nothing is new in art, right? I was wounded 3 times. The first time was in hand-to-hand combat, and I didn't even know I was wounded. And the second time was in close combat by a grenade, but I wasn't severely wounded either. The third time was a mine. It was a sack of clothes. I picked it up and it exploded, and that took me out of the war. I couldn't talk about the war. And then when I did, they had no idea what I was talking about. Finally, I was talking to a doctor, had no clue about war. He was talking about toilet training and was I close to my mother, things that were stupid. So I got so angry with him, I drew him pictures of what I was seeing, of what I was remembering, what I would see every time I closed my eyes. And it was very powerful. I saw a dance on public television. This is in 1970. A woman in leotards, young, small, took a leap across the stage, the dance floor, and I felt, I can't describe how I felt. It was incredible to see a person fly when I was in a body cast on a bed. The image was imprinted in my brain. From that moment on, I just was enamored with dance and the human form as never before. Damage from the war lasts forever. And the beauty of dance is gone the moment it's done. So what I'm doing is what these women work all their lives for, put it in bronze so it's frozen in time. Their expression, their work from 3 years old to 50 is memorialized. It is put into a monument to what they did. So the art, the sculpting, sketches, the paintings were so powerful, and it was a language, even though I'm a college-educated person speaking English to English-speaking doctors, they didn't understand. But the art transcended all languages, all ages, they all knew what it was, and they wanted to discuss it now. That's where the art comes in. It's the bridge between what happened in the rest of the world.
Now, let's take a moment to celebrate another Louisiana treasure. This week, we're looking at the time-honored tradition of the horse-drawn hearse.
Horse-drawn hearses such as this one were very common in the 1890s and 1900s. They were used by benevolent societies and churches and, of course, funeral homes throughout Louisiana in order to bury people with a dignified burial. There's a lot of symbolism on this particular hearse. Of course, it's black. It has torches on top, which means death. And if you notice on the back, there's some inverted torches, which means death as well. This particular one came from the Black Benevolent Society in St. Francisville, and which was a burial society. If you paid your dues or your insurance, you would get buried in this particular hearse. Hearses really like this are becoming more and more rare. Actually, we have 3 at the Rural Life Museum. This one dates around 1890. We have one from St. Michael Cemetery in Convent, Louisiana, which is the earliest one. It dates 1850. And then we have a third one which actually dates 1914. This hearse used to be used at the Angola Rodeo and was displayed there and was owned by one of the guards and associate wardens at Angola. and he actually loaned it to the museum and eventually gave it to the museum.
Horse-drawn hearses are occasionally still used today in funeral ceremonies. The tradition is present at Angola Penitentiary, where a funeral coach, hand-built by inmates, is used in a procession to the graveyard there on the grounds.
And finally, we're off to the Denver Art Museum in Denver, Colorado, to an exhibition offering something for everyone, from contemporary artists to the American West, pre-Columbian weavings to Navajo design. Spun, Adventures in Textiles is redefining what some may typically perceive as art.
Spun at the Denver Art Museum is a campus-wide exhibit that wraps people's minds in textiles. And from pre-Columbian weavings to contemporary light installations, DAM is pushing the boundaries of what one might consider to be fiber art.
It's an eye-opener for what today we take for granted. This exhibition functions on so many different levels. One is exactly that, function. How different textiles might have been used or were used, whether it's for warmth and comfort when you're sleeping, protection, sacred rituals. There are so many different techniques represented in this exhibition. People think of weaving and embroidery perhaps off the top of their heads, but by extension, quilting and coverlets, tapestry, block printing, resist dyeing, so all the different ways to decorate that piece of cloth.
But it's not just about cloth for today's artists. Many are experimenting, weaving together unexpected materials, and echoing the layers and depth found in more traditional textile works.
There are a plethora of materials available to artists today, and this is such an incredible representation of over 40 years of contemporary art. And you can really see whether it's textiles, wood, charred wood, light. There's different mediums throughout this exhibition that really lure you in. And it's different than the historic textile galleries where there's much more of a functional aspect to the work. In this show, it's more artists of our own time thinking about issues that are relevant to us living today. This is a young artist. She's taken apart children's teddy bears and then reconstituted them in this rug, in this wall piece, and creates this sort of Rorschach pattern, you know, the ink blot test. Sort of having fun with materials and thinking about how when you take them out of their normal context, they might mean something different.
I made these works in the early 90s at the height of the AIDS crisis. A lot of my friends were dying, and this work really was in response to that. So for me to plow my way systematically through time by knitting, for about 10 years of knitting about 12 hours, 13 hours a day. So it was a way for me to keep track and also to meditate on the passage of time.
Artist Oliver Herring's work is a reflection of his experience. I asked curator Alice Zabritz how other people throughout history have used materials, and as a result, what we learn about culture.
Textiles say a lot about culture. It could be the materials, because certain areas of the world having flocks of sheep and they might be making their textiles from wool. Others might have flax or linen. Others are silk growing culture. So where you live in the world, that's going to influence to a degree what your textiles are made from. Of course, trade is a big part of that, and people are always incorporating things taken from a distance into their own. Color choices can be dictated by culture. You'll see a lot of indigo in the show. Many of those textiles are from Japan, whereas the Uzbek ikat is a flame of colors. They are in an art museum, and we are appreciating them for either fabulous design, beautiful workmanship, but always the beauty of the object.
So we're here in the quilt studio, which is part of Spun. Why did the museum want to include a space like this, Jenna?
This is not your grandma's quilt studio. This is really about contemporary practice. So really thinking about the ways that colors and patterns and different textures work, which is exactly the same process that a painter or a sculptor goes through in making this creative decision.
There's labels throughout the exhibition. You can use your mobile phone and take a picture of the QR code beneath the label, and it takes you to videos and the artists talking about their work. And I would venture to say that all art is interactive. a lot of contemporary artists, the viewer completes the piece. So it is an interactive thing. We all bring baggage and different meanings to a work, and the transposition is looking at interactivity through technology. And that's a very new thing. I mean, only the accessibility of young artists being able to work with technology to make a piece like that has only come about in the last decade. Your movement is picked up by cameras that you don't see and is translated through software to create this movement that's projected onto the wall. It becomes this optical effect, and it's quite beautiful. But it also makes you aware of your body and your own movements. It's a very poetic, simple piece. It's a very different way of thinking about making art, and so art is no longer just a painting or a sculpture or a photography for that matter. So that's what I love about contemporary art. You can see this sort of transgression of how they're all continuing to push the limits of what a piece of wood can do, or just fabric and materials in general, to convey these very deep, thoughtful, emotional, and political responses.
For more about this exhibit, visit denverartmuseum.org. And that's it for this edition of Art Rocks. Don't forget to visit our website at lpb.org/artrocks, where you'll find feature videos and information on upcoming arts events. Until next time, I'm James Fox Smith, and thanks for watching.